Thank you, Madam Speaker. 12 months ago and one day, 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙍𝙍 stood in this House and told Territorians she had a roadmap for the future, a plan for the Territory. But unlike so many of the CLP government's big promises to Territorians, this budget is less of a roadmap and more of a weedy goat track. The truth is, Madam Speaker, yesterday's budget lacks a vision for the Territory's future and fails to drive it forward in a meaningful way. The Chief Minister's big promises about reining in budget and responsible fiscal management are up in smoke. More spin from the government. What she and her Treasurer have delivered is the most expensive budget the Territory has ever seen. Territorians have the country's highest net debt per capita, roughly $55,000 per resident. Yet somehow they've still managed to deliver more cuts than a barbershop on a busy Saturday morning. Territory debt, which was forecast to steadily decrease under the former Labor government's stewardship, will increase by an additional $1.5 billion over the next 3 years under the CLP government. They have absolutely no plan to get the spending back under control, other than telling public servants to tighten their belts to the tune of $20 million and then pointing the finger somewhere else. It is quite a feat to deliver the most expensive budget in Territory history, while still making cut after cut. In my first speech to Parliament as the Opposition Leader, Madam Speaker, I said I would spend my time holding this government to account. I said I would do this constructively without criticising for the sake of politicising points. But it would be absolutely remiss of me to stand here today representing fellow Territorians to congratulate the CLP on their budget. It would not be truthful on my part. Madam Speaker, what Territorians want and need is a government that invests in people's success, that invests in a future where every Territorian, no matter where they live, has the chance to thrive. And I acknowledge the CLP's commitment to recycling, Madam Speaker, given there are quite a few Labor initiatives that they have repackaged and pushed out the door and renamed to claim as their own, including a number of significant national partnerships and agreements with the federal Labor Albanese government. The $2 billion to fully fund our Territory government schools, the $4 billion 10-year remote housing package, and the increased funding under the NT Remote Aboriginal Investment Agreement. These are incredibly important initiatives that the former Labor government worked very hard to land and secure. We're pleased that the CLP government is claiming them now because it does show their understanding of how important and significant these agreements are. They are important, Madam Speaker, because they're about lifting fellow Territorians up, about giving our kids the best possible start to life, about building a better, safer and stronger community together. And it is why, on our side, we are so proud to have delivered this when Labor was in government. Madam Speaker, it is hard to see where the CLP government has shown any such strategic vision or foresight in their first budget. But at least we're thankful that those initiatives remain intact. Beyond these reheated announcements, if the budget provides a vision or roadmap for the Territory, it is a bleak one. Despite receiving $800 million in Commonwealth funding this year, and an additional $100 million in the Territory-generated revenue compared to our last budget, the CLP government has failed to invest in key areas. There are deep cuts, Madam Speaker, to infrastructure funding, and that means less funding for roads, less funding for schools, less funding for hospitals, and less funding for community building. It means less work out there for Territory businesses and fewer jobs for Territorians. The Territory has the highest rate of homelessness in the country, a significant contributor, unfortunately, to crime and antisocial behaviour across all of our communities. At the same time, Territory families continue to feel the pinch of the cost of living pressures. Knowing this, the government has chosen to slash the housing funding by more than $100 million in their first budget. That's cuts to urban housing, remote housing, cuts to government employee housing, and housing in homelands and on our town camps. The economy-driving tourism sector has copped a funding cut too, which simply defies belief. Given the many thousands of small businesses here in the Territory, Territory workers, Territory family businesses that rely on the thriving tourism and hospitality sector to earn a living. Our natural resources also lose out, with an $11 million cut to measures that protect and maintain our beautiful natural resources and the Territory lifestyle we all love to enjoy. This includes scrapping Aboriginal Ranger grants, a huge shock to us yesterday when going through the budget papers. An independent review of the grants program found that it had made a profound contribution to land management across the Northern Territory, not to mention critical jobs and community-based industries that have benefited from the previous Labor government's initiative of the Aboriginal Ranger grants. Our ranger groups on country use these capital grants for vehicles, for equipment that allow access to country, for critical land management activities, as well as equipment for weed control, feral animal removal and fire mitigation to look after country, not just for those groups, but for all of us to enjoy. Scrapping this very important program is a massive blow to land and sea management right across the Northern Territory, as are the deep cuts to water resource management, water security improvements and rangelands funding. There are also cuts of around $14 million in the agricultural space, including biosecurity and animal welfare. It will take some time to really get to the bottom of these cuts, Madam Speaker. Have only just had a look at the budget yesterday, but it is fair to say that there are many Territory losers out of this first attempt of a budget by the CLP. This is a government with no vision and no idea about what Territorians actually need and care about. Strong economy that supports everyone, including our most vulnerable Territorians and our most remote Territorians, should also go hand in hand. But the first budget of the CLP government puts investment in prisons well above investment in jobs and economic growth, in social cohesion and community development, in a better, brighter, healthier, stronger Territory for all. This budget is a missed opportunity for the Northern Territory on community safety, which was an absolute priority for Territorians, as we all know. They want to see people who do the wrong thing face the consequences. But community safety is much more than just the short-term band-aid solutions or quick fixes that put more people on a path to criminalisation and reoffending. Community safety is about investing in our young people so that they can thrive. It is about setting people on a path to become successful and contributing members of our community. It is about crime prevention in the first place, early intervention and correctional rehabilitation. The CLP has missed the mark on addressing the root causes of crime and serious issues within our justice system that are fueling repeat offending. Territory Labor has been very clear. If you pose a risk to the community, you should not be granted bail. But by being on bail and serving a sentence, it should be a pathway. This should not be a pathway to future offending. That only happens when governments fail to invest in programs that break the cycle of crime. Strong governments make tough decisions, not just to punish, but to prevent. That means investing in early intervention, rehabilitation, and programs to support people to change the very course of their lives. This is how we will deliver here in the Territory the longer-term resolutions to preventing crime, to creating safer communities right across the Northern Territory. And on this front, Madam Speaker, the CLP government is failing Territorians. Their refusal to invest in meaningful crime prevention will have consequences that reach well beyond this budget cycle. If the CLP believes its decisions aren't contributing to the Territory's rising crime rates, then it's not just out of touch, it is delusional. It is an incredibly disappointing approach from a government who talked up strong and talked up big in the last election to already be out of ideas 9 months in. out of care and out of touch for Territorians, as evidenced by the Treasurer's more interested in casting a lure than knuckling down and doing the hard work a Treasurer should do. Every bit of evidence around the world, Madam Speaker, points to the fact that a punitive-only approach is likely to create more problems for our community in the long run, putting more people into the cycle of crime. Even the acting police commissioner said, "We can't arrest our way out of this problem." Madam Speaker, what this budget is completely and utterly failing to do is to provide investment around the social determinants to reduce crime beyond what our former Labor government already banked into the budget. Those opposite talk about addressing the root causes, but it is pretty clear they have no idea what this really means. Well, only now, 9 months in, we're starting to hear them articulate perhaps some type of understanding. Madam Speaker, those opposite talk about addressing the root causes of crime, but we're yet to see what programs they say will make the difference. That's largely because they're all about band-aid solutions, quick fixes to look good and to sound good on a media release or in a press grab. Madam Speaker, we all know here in this House there are no quick fixes. These challenges are long-term and they need long-term solutions. Addressing them requires sustained and meaningful effort, not flashy press releases. It requires strong partnership with community, with the federal government, with our local government and those in the community sector in particular, when it comes to supporting elders and everyone who has a role to play in this space. Madam Speaker, we have seen multiple government backbenchers just in the last few weeks break ranks to talk about the concerns of crime in their own electorates within recent months under their own government. But unfortunately for them, there are no answers in this budget for them or their constituents or any of ours in the crossbench and opposition when it comes to preventing crime, for rehabilitating people and getting people out of the cycle of crime. One hugely missed opportunity, Madam Speaker, is the 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑 Police Station. This was the Chief Minister's chance to fully commit to staffing that facility after the horrific incident experienced recently, which triggered the urgent callback to Parliament and the opposition's good faith and good hands in following the government through their urgent amendments to legislation. The community of 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀 and indeed Darwin and Palmerston have called for this. This is the Chief Minister's chance through her Treasurer to put this to rest and to create a safer community. Or, if that's too hard for the Madam Speaker, the opposition suggests turning the 𝙍𝙀𝙀𝙀 Police Station into a community safety hub, one that is shared with police and service providers that create the opportunity which the 𝙍𝙀𝙀 community and many of those who love to be in the 𝙍𝙀𝙀 community can all access as needed. But it takes the leadership and the bravery and courage to do that, and this opportunity was missed, Madam Speaker. Of the $495 million committed to corrections this year, how much is actually going towards rehabilitating prisoners so they are less likely to commit offences when they come out of jail? A measly $4.2 million for domestic and family violence programs, Madam Speaker, when we know a majority of people who are serving sentences in the Northern Territory's correctional services are there because it was related to family and domestic violence. Madam Speaker, overall, that's 0.8% of the prison's budget. Less than 1% aimed at getting offenders back onto a good track, a better path, and changing their lives. Madam Speaker, the CLP likes to talk about the root causes a lot. Now that they hopefully know what the root causes are, when it comes to acting on them, they still do not provide answers to the community. This time last year, Madam Speaker, in her budget reply speech, Leah Finocchiaro, our now Chief Minister, said that a future CLP government would change the law to make it mandatory for domestic violence offenders to attend behavioural change programs while serving their prison sentence. Madam Speaker, the government has now before the House the Domestic Violence Legislation Amendment right now, and there is absolutely nothing in those amendments about legislating for behaviour change programs. Hopefully this is an oversight and it will be amended by the government before the debate comes ahead. Madam Speaker, if the CLP had included an amendment along those lines, then I believe we would be behind it. But it's simply not there. They still have time to make this change. Madam Speaker, what's also missing is increased funding to tackle domestic, family and sexual violence prevention. The 2025 budget is pretty much on par with former Labor government's funding in the 2024 budget. We've been trying to get to the bottom of the CLP's claims that they are increasing domestic violence funding by $36 million. Now we will finally have the answer. It's not true. The Territory Labor opposition wants to keep working with the government when it comes to supporting the domestic violence sector around ensuring it is properly resourced and locally driven with community solutions. We are, of course, pleased that the government is continuing to invest in tackling domestic violence to the same level as the previous Labor government was, but it is extremely disappointing that they continue to cut the sector and the community out of those very important critical conversations when it comes to how best that money can be spent. Madam Speaker, the CLP continue to ignore the evidence and all the hard work that has already happened in this space. They've decided they know best. Domestic violence experts are locked out of the conversation. Madam Speaker, we all know that to tackle domestic violence, the partnerships around our community should be and should always be the priority for the best approach. This is not patronising, Madam Speaker. This is not from a everyone knows best in this House approach. This is to an approach of listening to experts and the people who deal with day in and day out the horrific impact of domestic, family and sexual violence in the Northern Territory, to make a change to the real people in the Territory who are experiencing this horrifying and plaguing violence. Madam Speaker, we are yet to see the government commit to the 35 recommendations of the coronial recommendations following the tragic domestic violence deaths of 5 Territory women. When talking about the roadmaps, those recommendations are a very clear and stepped out and precise roadmap to tackling this horrendous domestic violence scourge. Yet the CLP government has largely cast them aside. We have offered to be part of the bipartisan delegation, along with the crossbench members of the Northern Territory Parliament, to go to Canberra and to argue for more funding to address domestic violence and make sure once and for all the Territory is need-based funded in this area. So far, the Chief Minister has been silent on this truly unique opportunity of unified Territory parliamentarians standing up for the whole of the Territory together, regardless of politics. Chief Minister, when will you use your voice so that we can stand behind you and support you and further the work of Territory? This is the time. When the newly elected Albanese Labor government is in, or they are now, we will offer our support to you, Chief Minister. Partnerships with the sector and the community is what we need across all 3 tiers of government. It is critical when it comes to thinking about the big issues we must all tackle together. Unfortunately, this budget just doesn't seem to get it. Madam Speaker, when it comes to community safety, police officers are certainly finding out the hard way that talk is cheap when it comes to the CLP. Over and over, the Chief Minister promised our police her unconditional support, but then turned around and put a measly 3% pay rise on the table for the EBA. The budget papers confirmed that, Madam Speaker, yesterday. And that's all there is for police and other public sector workers when they come to negotiate their EBAs with this CLP government. At the time when violent crime is on the rise and the most recent police statistics absolutely support that, the Chief Minister, who is also our Police Minister, has turned her back on police when it comes to shouldering much of the responsibility around law and order and the agenda the CLP have. This is a far cry from the unconditional support that the Chief Minister promised when she was in opposition. Madam Speaker, we acknowledge that the CLP has maintained the funding injected into the budget by the former Labor government to support an additional 200 police officers, as well as to upgrade the Joint Emergency Services Communication Centre. And we support that, and we still do today. Madam Speaker, both of these were key recommendations of the Police Resource Review, and it is good to see that the CLP is continuing with these critical community safety initiatives, as they should. What is less clear, Madam Speaker, is that where the rest of the review recommendations are at. The Chief Minister said in her budget reply speech last year when she was in opposition that she would follow the former Labor government and implement the 15 recommendations. We haven't heard from her since about the other recommendations, and particularly around measures to improve the police force's culture and strengthen wellbeing and welfare for our police officers. We know the Police Minister has had to be shamed into agreeing to an inquiry into senior hiring practices in the force. 2 months later and one Police Commissioner down, we have not heard another word about the inquiry from the Chief Minister. We simply don't know if the NT Police, who have experienced their fair share of destabilisation under the CLP government, are getting on with those Police Resource Review recommendations, which are needed now more than ever, Madam Speaker, to bolster attrition and morale across the force. Madam Speaker, I've talked before about the disappointing micro-investment this government is putting into rehabilitating offenders, in choosing instead the punitive-only approach. Sadly, this budget confirms that the CLP is taking the same approach when it comes to children and young people. Despite the mountain of evidence concerning the harm caused to children by incarceration, the CLP government stubbornly refuses to invest in any meaningful way in prevention, early intervention or therapeutic supports that will actually help our Territory kids get back on track. This time last year, 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑𝘼𝙔𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙍 said her future government would immediately establish boot camps in Alice Springs and Darwin. And I quote, Madam Speaker, "This will give the courts a place to send youth offenders as part of sentencing," end quote. This is what she said at the time, this time last year. We are yet to see any signs of these boot camps in either Darwin or Alice Springs. And this time last year, the Chief Minister, when she was in opposition, said that her future government would make diversion programs mandatory for young offenders. We are yet to see any sign of that either, Madam Speaker. The only diversion program the CLP can lay claim to is the circuit breaker program, which they often reference when they're trying to deflect questions about their lack of action on domestic violence. Again, this is a recycled Labor program, rebranded as the co-responder model, but it's great to see the CLP continuing with it. But we know the community wants to see more investment and more effort in preventing youth crime and diverting children away from the bad behaviour that we see. Madam Speaker, there needs to be a greater focus on skills, training and employment pathways to give kids options and opportunity, and this needs to be front and centre of what the CLP speaks about. And I know that the CLP will say, it's only been 8 or 9 months, give us time, as they always do, but this is a real concern right across the Northern Territory. And since coming to government, the CLP have not uttered a word at all about these things. And 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙑𝘼𝙔𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙍, the Chief Minister, promised she would do this 12 months ago. Not a single word. So we have to presume that they have absolutely no intention of meeting any of these commitments. They just sounded good at the time. The reality is, Madam Speaker, that the Chief Minister's one-note approach to governing means that, beyond locking people up, adults or kids, she has no answers to improving community safety and will not let her team lead in this space either. Madam Speaker, when it comes to education, we welcome the CLP's commitment to the agreement which Labor struck with the Albanese Labor government to fully fund every Northern Territory public school. That investment is in the budget papers, and we congratulate the CLP for continuing this work. It is absolutely vital to ensure that every child across the Territory has the best possible access to the education, no matter where they live. In a budget reply last year, I note the then opposition leader and now Chief Minister, 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙔𝙍𝙍𝙍 said a CLP government would also invest in expanding school-based policing and increase access to special education for children and teenagers with disabilities. Now, I would appreciate it, and my team and I would like to see what the CLP could point out to us where those items are in the budget papers, because they don't appear to be there as a new initiative. Madam Speaker, these are critical investment areas which affect all of our electorates, and it is disappointing that the Chief Minister hasn't met her promise in these areas when it comes to delivering the first CLP budget. Our Labor opposition supports the funding to increase more school counsellors in our 153 Northern Territory Government schools, but would like to receive more detail on this from the CLP Government on how they will actually achieve this and what it'll look like for our schools on the ground. Madam Speaker, when it comes to infrastructure, the Treasurer has been flagging for some time now that he intended to cut infrastructure funding from his own department. And I spoke about it earlier, but it does bear the need to discuss again, Madam Speaker, as we certainly didn't expect the cuts to be so deep and far-reaching as what was announced yesterday. And Madam Speaker, we know that the Treasurer can talk about cash splash and programs, and he likes to try and muddy the water on this one, but the numbers in the books do not lie. He has ripped $131 million out of the infrastructure budget. And yesterday, here in this House, he avoided answering details to questions that we asked about which projects will be cut from the CLP infrastructure budget because of this decision. But I'm sure you'll get those answers ready for us in estimates, Treasurer. And hopefully the Treasurer spends his time properly preparing for estimates rather than fishing on taxpayers' time. Madam Speaker, what we know is that this budget is an incredibly short-sighted move with significant flow-on impacts to businesses, to jobs, to families and to all of our communities. The Treasurer will not give us the specifics, but what roads, schools, hospitals and community development projects will simply not be built or upgraded now because of your decision. This is a bad move for the Territory economy and for the benefits that our Territory community would reap. Madam Speaker, like so much of what the CLP does, this budget is all slogans with no substance. It manages to hook Territorians in with more debt while delivering significant and widespread funding cuts and offering no clear economic vision for the future. It is a disappointing budget for Territorians who were promised so much more from their Chief Minister and have now received so little. No wonder the Treasurer went fishing, Madam Speaker, or perhaps was told by the Chief Minister to stay on the boat and get out of the way. Madam Speaker, in talking about CLP's missed opportunities, just yesterday we saw the Northern Territory Indigenous Business Network, or NTIBN, put out their own media release. And Madam Speaker, I take this opportunity to support some of the areas that are called for by the NTIBN from their media release, which states they call on the NT government to commit to a whole-of-government Aboriginal economic development strategy with measurable targets led by Aboriginal people for Aboriginal people. Expand and enforce Aboriginal procurement policy targets across all agencies, ensuring not just contract awards, but real engagement with Aboriginal businesses in delivery. And support Aboriginal participation in emerging industries, including renewable energy, digital services, construction and bush foods, through the co-design development plans and investment partnerships. Madam Speaker, so far the details are grim with the CLP's first budget, but overall we would say underwhelming and not hitting the mark. Madam Speaker, we have far too many questions that remain unanswered in the detail from the CLP. They keep getting snagged on that detail actually, Madam Speaker. But as I said when I first became the opposition leader, Madam Speaker, my team and I stand ready to support further funding, investment, policies and programs that will support Territorians for the better. We will remain constructive, but we will also keep the CLP government to account when it comes to the promises and the commitments they made in delivering for Territorians. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Just before you stand, I'd like to acknowledge the Honourable Jane Agard, former Speaker of the Northern Territory and former member for Nightcliff. Deputy Chief Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I rise to make my own contribution to this debate. But, Madam Speaker, before I get started on what I want to say, I just want to touch on a few points that the opposition leader spoke about, where she was trying to rewrite history and say that things aren't rosy and the Territory is in a bad place. Well, it was in a bad place, Madam Speaker, but the tide has turned and things are moving forward. Madam Speaker, the Leader Opposition spoke about having no plan and no roadmap, and it failed to drive forward. Madam Speaker, I'm not sure how the opposition leader hasn't read the budget and overview book, but clearly on page 5 there's a budget repair plan. It's black and white. So when the leader talks about there's no plan and no foresight, well, clearly on page 5 this talks about a plan for budget repair. So I asked the opposition leader to go back and read some of the documents, and obviously she was too busy to read through the budget books because clearly that plan is there. Madam Speaker, the Leader Opposition spoke about the most expensive budget ever seen. Madam Speaker, only in the last budget, the former Labor government predicted the deficit to be $1.75 billion. Under ours, it's 1.3. So, in fact, it's less. It's not as expensive. So, again, I'm not sure where the opposition are getting their information from, but the budget books are quite clear. Our budget has a less deficit than the previous Labor government. So, again, trying to rewrite history and say how this is the most expensive budget ever seen, clearly that's not the case, Madam Speaker. And, Madam Speaker, whilst I'm touching on that point, the previous Labor government tried to trick Territorians when they did their budget. They had a whole range of programs, and these are some of the infrastructure programs that the Treasurer has had to go through, which were programmed and not funded. So they were programmed, delivered for delivery, and they went out to communities and out to people right across the Northern Territory and say, we promise to build this road, we promise to build this community centre, we promise to build this health centre. But, Madam Speaker, they just put it onto the list and never funded it. Never funded it. So it was never going to get built. It was never going to happen, Madam Speaker. So what the Treasurer has done, and his own words describe this as a great budget, takes away and is not tricking Territorians. We have been open, transparent and upfront with Territorians, Madam Speaker, that we are going to make sure that the Territory moves forward. And we are starting in a very bad place, Madam Speaker. We have a massive debt and we have no money, where the previous Labor government spent like drunken sailors, effectively, where, again, $1.2 billion in their last budget of program infrastructure, and yet, Madam Speaker, only gave themselves $315 million to pay for that. So, again, back to those tricks and those games that they were playing with Territorians, Madam Speaker, saying, we'll put your program onto our program, so we'll give you your health clinic or your road or whatever infrastructure program you can name, up to $1.2 billion, and only budgeted $315 million to pay for that. And, Madam Speaker, let me tell you that $315 million is basically already taken up in the Arts Centre, the Mandorah ferry terminal and some remote housing. So there is no money. So it makes it even worse, Madam Speaker, in relation to, we'll promise you to do these infrastructure programs, and the monies which are allocated is already spent in other programs. As the previous Treasurers talked about, some go over and some go under, and it seemed to be with the Labor government, a lots go over and not many go under. The Leader of Opposition talked about jobs and employment. Well, Madam Speaker, let me tell you, there are no jobs from a program list. There are no jobs when your program lists community centres or roads and they never get delivered. So the opposition leader talks about how the Labor government have made all these jobs and there's all these jobs and somehow the CLP are going to cut those jobs. Madam Speaker, those jobs were never there because the program list was $1.2 billion and were never going to be delivered. Jobs, Madam Speaker, come from actual contracts, from people actually going and doing the work. Not just talking about it, Madam Speaker, and saying, oh, we're going to go and build the health clinic, we're going to go and build the new road, we're going to go and build that and build this. In fact, that doesn't create jobs, Madam Speaker. What creates jobs is actual work, and that's what the Treasurer has done. He's listed the infrastructure program which will actually get things done. Will create jobs, create employment and move the territory forward. Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition spoke about the losers of the territory budget, and she's talked about how these losers, but Madam Speaker, she didn't name any. She didn't name any losers, but Madam Speaker, what I say is the winners in this budget are all Territorians, because we are going to focus on community safety. Community safety is our #1 priority, and we know that because we have spent an exorbitant amount of money on police, corrections and also the courts because Labor failed to invest in public safety. In fact, Madam Speaker, she spoke about bail as well and how bail is a program that needs to keep continuing on. Well, Madam Speaker, back when we were in opposition, the then Labor government conducted a bail review because of an unfortunate death in the community, and their recommendations were nothing, no recommendations at all. And in fact, Madam Speaker, if my memory serves me correct, in that week when the Labor government announced they were doing nothing after the bail review, some 10,000 people signed that petition on that particular week because they were absolutely devastated that the previous Labor government were not going to take any action on the bail. So their review, which they conducted, said don't do anything. And yet, Madam Speaker, public safety is absolute #1 priority. Madam Speaker, the Leader of Opposition spoke about our backbenchers breaking ranks and talking about crime and safety, because that's what Territorians are talking about. And that's what Territorians have been talking about for not just the last 9 months, Madam Speaker, for many years. For many years. And our backbenchers are doing their job, Madam Speaker. They're out there in the community and the ministers, and I'm sure that the Labor opposition and the crossbenchers get the same people coming to their office that come to our office crying out for help, crying out for support in relation to community safety. And unfortunately, the previous Labor government failed to listen, failed to act, and the consequences were that people were not feeling safe in the community, crime stats were going through the roof, people were getting robbed, assaulted, murdered, right across the community, Madam Speaker, where this government are changing, turning the tide, making community safety one #1 priority. So, Madam Speaker, what I do say to all the members, including our backbenchers, please go out there, talk to your community, speak up about this, because if it's not front and centre, nothing's going to get done about it. And we are listening to the community, Madam Speaker, because that is what our job is. Our job is to listen to community, and public safety is #1. Well, Madam Speaker, we talked about no forward planning, Madam Speaker. Well, crime stats and crime statistics over the last 8 years have put the Territory into a horrific place. Not only if you're a victim of crime, Madam Speaker, but what about the businesses? What about the tourism? And what about in your hometown of Alice Springs, Madam Speaker? People were hurting, businesses were suffering because crime was out of control. Madam Speaker, in this budget, we are spending $608 million on police, $495 million on corrections, and approximately $240 million on upgrading the court system. Because, as the Treasurer has said many times, if you spend $1 on the police system, you need to spend $1.5 into the corrections and the courts. And that's what the Labor government failed to do. And that's why, Madam Speaker, when we come to office, we had overcrowding through the prison system. In fact, to such a point, Madam Speaker, that the previous Labor government allowed prisoners to go into watch houses, affecting the ability for police to keep the community safe. Affecting the police's ability, their #1 priority is to keep the community safe, which is some reason, Madam Speaker, that wasn't a priority of the previous Labor government. So we're here to make sure that we keep the community safe. So thank you, backbenchers. Please continue to talk, please continue to speak out, and please continue to represent your community members, because that's what your job is to do. That's what all our job is to do. Madam Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition spoke about the Nightcliff Police Station, and missed opportunities. We'll talk about political interference, Madam Speaker. There you go. a police station that was built which is not even a functional area. It doesn't even have watch houses. It does not even have a watch house, Madam Speaker. So when you promise to the community and you make a promise and you go and build a police station and the police don't use, Madam Speaker, that is what we talk about when this previous Labor government politically interfere
Take a seat,
with
please,
police.
Minister. Member for Karama. Look, I think that...
Point of order. Standing Order 31, I find that offensive, Madam Speaker.
Withdraw that for the sake of relations in Parliament.
Withdraw and
please,
replace
Member for
talking
Wadgett.
nonsense.
Okay. Let's calm down and let's listen to each other in silence like we have so far.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It appears to me that me correcting the record and stating a few home truths is really hurting the opposition because they don't like hearing the truth. What they want to do is what they did for the previous 8 years, Madam Speaker, is come in here and fluff around and talk all this nonsense and talk all these things that, oh, it's all safe, it's all rosy, nothing to see here. Well, the truth of the matter, Madam Speaker, there's a lot to see here, and it's caused by the previous Labor government. We have been in office for about 9 months, and we are turning the tide. We are putting people in prison. We are making the place safe. We are investing in courts. We're investing in the community. We are making the Territory a safer place. But, Madam Speaker, it is a big ship to turn around because the previous Labor government let lots of water on the ship, and it's very difficult to turn around. 8 years of missed opportunity and political interference. Madam Speaker, let's talk about the Leader of Opposition spoke about rehabilitation and the root causes and corrections and not having programs available. Madam Speaker, again, I'm going to correct the record here again. We know, Madam Speaker, that we've faced some challenges in the prison, in the correction system. We know we've got 500 new beds. We've effectively brought online 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙍. We've increased Alice Springs. We have actual chronic staff and shortages. And I do want to take the opportunity to thank and shout out to the prison officers who do a great job. But, Madam Speaker, let me just run through some figures in relation to education and rehabilitation, where I do note that Labor pride themselves on rehabilitation and training and breaking the cycle. Madam Speaker, so despite our increase in numbers, Corrections has delivered more educational programs between 1 July 24 and 17 April 25 than it did during the same time in 24. 671 prisoners completed these programs in 2025 compared to 553 in 2024. So, Madam Speaker, what we're doing, what that shows you is that we are actually increase the education in prison to break the cycle. Madam Speaker, another point I want to correct the record is a focus on offender rehabilitation and engagement in family violence programs. In that period, 103 completions for us versus 95 for Labor. And the RAGE program, Madam Speaker, 41 completions versus 12 for the same time. 41 versus 12. So again, Madam Speaker, just to show, for correcting the record, that the CLP government are not only keeping the community safe, we're attempting to rehabilitate and educate people to make them better people, to break the cycle of reoffending. Because jailing is failing, Madam Speaker, and we know that the previous Labor government didn't do anything and they just wanted to lock people up without any training because those stats speak for themselves. Madam Speaker, the Leader of Opposition spoke about children and young people, how we're not doing anything about that. And I'm sure my colleague's going to talk about that, but I just want to mention two words: circuit breaker. That is a program, Madam Speaker, designed to intervene early. And I'm going to let my colleague talk more detail, but I just want to let the Territorians know that the CLP are doing things more than one at a time. We're running the ball up in multiple directions and making multiple hits to make the community safe, because that's what our #1 priority is. So we're investing in police, we're investing in the courts, we're investing in corrections, and we're investing in children and young people. So it's clear that the CLP has got a long way to go, Madam Speaker, and I'm under no illusion that we are still finding it tough and it's still difficult out there in the community to operate your family, to operate your business. But what I do want to say is, Territorians, we have your back. And, Madam Speaker, boot camps The opposition spoke about no sign of boot camps. Well, clearly she hasn't been out in the community, Madam Speaker, and hasn't spoken to her own colleagues, because Alice Springs paperbark facility has been completed, and that's going to be a boot camp. Tennant Creek has had people in there, young offenders, since March. It's open. And Madam Speaker, Catherine is back on track. We are planning again, Madam Speaker, 8 months. You can't do much. We know the previous government were in power for 8 years and did nothing, but we are working hard, and we've got many irons in the fire, and we're working. Compulsory diversion is happening through our youth justice program, so we're going to support that, and we're going to move forward. Madam Speaker, the Leader of Opposition spoke about the budget being short-sighted. Well, let me tell you, Madam Speaker, the previous Labor government's budget wasn't short-sighted, because they planned to trick Territorians in their previous budgets, because they planned, they thought and made positive steps to trick Territorians in this funding cliff, where they'd make a program out for 3 years or 4 years, fund it for the first year, so they didn't reach their made-up debt ceiling. So they planned to do it. So their budget planned, they thought about it, actual positive steps to trick Territorians, Madam Speaker. So they should hang their head in shame now that they've been caught out, and the budget is what it is because this Labor government failed Territorians. Shame on them. Madam Speaker, I congratulate this Treasurer on this balanced, responsive, great budget. This is the first budget of the Leah Finocchiaro government, and a budget that puts victims first and restores what Labor broke. It's a responsible budget delivered by the Treasurer, and is designed to begin undoing Labor's spiralling, completely out of control, $11 billion worth of debt. Madam Speaker, this is our first budget, and it's focused on law and order, with $1.34 billion allocated to our justice system as a whole, not just policing. Madam Speaker, the Northern Territory faces a serious crime problem, including aggravated robberies, assaults and drug-related offences. Events such as the aggravated robbery of a 101-year-old man in Darwin, the home invasion and injuries to a mother and a baby in Alice Springs, the home invasion and serious assault of a 70-year-old man in Woodroffe, and the senseless death of Declan Laverty and Linkford Fett. These horrendous crimes underscore the urgency of the issue. These crimes are unacceptable, Madam Speaker. The CLP was elected to act on the Territory's high crime rate, and that's what we've done. We've prioritised community safety, even if it means increasing our incarceration and overcrowding our prisons. But, Madam Speaker, I've said it many times, if you're committed to a detention centre by the courts, we'll find you a bed. And we make no apologies, Madam Speaker, for this strong response, because we want to keep the community safe. When we assume police, prisoner numbers have already exceeded the viable bed capacity, extending the police into watch houses was the Labor's answer. The previous Labor government ignored the mounting pressures, neglected our frontline services and left us with a crime crisis. When I say us, Madam Speaker, I mean community, the Northern Territory residents. Within 8 months, Madam Speaker, not 8 years, we've brought online over 500 new beds in our correction system. This is through the government's decisive action. Corrections has moved out of the Palmerston and Alice Springs watch houses. We've introduced legislation to enable private sector support for the corrections workforce and funding expansions to ensure our officers can focus on maintaining the safe and good order in our prison facilities. In just 8 months, we've delivered stronger sentencing laws, given police greater powers and reinstated mandatory sentencing for DVO breaches. And yes, Madam Speaker, this has increased prison numbers and put pressure on our correction system. But today's budget strengthens the justice system to take care of these prisoners and to tackle the crime consequences, and most importantly, Madam Speaker, to deliver consequences. The corrections budget is $495 million with substantial new funding to expand capacity, enhance program and support community safety. Madam Speaker, there is an additional $59 million of new money for additional operational services in Darwin, Berrimah and Alice Springs. $20 million of the $59 million is for prisoner health and $4.2 million for domestic, family and sexual violence reduction programs. Many of our Territory prisoners often require extensive health care, which can impact on the cost of their incarceration. The remaining funds are for operational costs, with more contingencies to address a rise in prison numbers should they be needed. Madam Speaker, investing in rehabilitation inside our prison isn't just smart, it reduces the reoffending, lowers long-term costs and delivers safer communities. It's a sharp contrast to Labor's short-sighted neglect of the correction system. Increasing budgets to corrections may not be cost-effective, especially if the resources are directly primary towards incarceration rather than community-based alternatives and rehabilitation programs. This budget has $8.5 million for community corrections to expand electronic monitoring. Studies have shown that community-based sentences like probation or parole are often more cost-effective than incarceration, and Madam Speaker, there's a lot more to do in this area and we continue to do that. Providing opportunities for offenders to gain skills and education can improve their employability and reduce the likelihood of reoffending, leading to long-term benefits to the community. This budget also addresses funding failures such as a $34.7 million time-limited funding. These are those CLIFS funding, Madam Speaker, I was speaking earlier about programming it, funding it for 1 year, the program's in place, but no funding. Again, Madam Speaker, this is where the previous Labor government had to consciously think, positively act to trick Territorians. And they've been caught out, Madam Speaker. They've been caught out big time by the Treasurer. $20 million of this, Madam Speaker, is for staffing across all divisions of corrections, for custodial and support positions in the prisons to manage rising prison numbers. The funding provides certainty to NDIS teams, bail-supported accommodation and electronic monitoring. Effective corrections deliver safer communities and lower reoffending rates, while ensuring taxpayers aren't burdened by unnecessary costs. To achieve this, money must be spent on improving and expanding our corrections facilities and strengthening our educational programs. Madam Speaker, this budget demonstrates our unwavering commitment to community safety. By delivering significant funding to increase corrections, we are providing the resources necessary to address challenges we inherited, enhance rehabilitation and create a safer Territorians for all. Madam Speaker, as Corrections Minister, I congratulate the Treasurer and our government on making law and order the centrepiece of this budget. As the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries and Mining Energy, I must stress the only way we can afford to address Labor's $11 billion debt and keep Territorians safe is to grow our own revenue. Unlike Labor, our government only announces programs and issues that have funding attached to them rather than just unfunded press releases. Our government's strategy to address our dire structural deficit is simple. We cannot and will not spend our way out of the situation. We will not do what Labor did and just promise the world and under-deliver. Our option is to increase our own source revenue through private investment while ensuring public monies are spent responsibly to attract and facilitate investment in the Northern Territory. Having the entirety of our budget sourced from Canberra is not a tenable or acceptable situation. Territory taxpayers deserve to know that their tax dollar is being spent wisely to generate more dollars and provide cost of living relief right across the Northern Territory, no matter where you live. Providing such cost of living relief is also one of our top priorities, Madam Speaker. For example, our government has followed through with the commitments to doubling the solar feed-in tariff from 9 cents to 18 cents from July 1, 2025 during peak times. Furthermore, our government has realised the impact of increasing energy costs and has shifted from a renewables at all cost focus to the lowest cost of energy focus to help Territorians' bottom line. Madam Speaker, for example, the community service obligation designed to keep Territorians' power prices low will increase in line with consumer price index. However, all of these things must be paid for somehow. Therefore, every dollar of private investment that can be spent on schools, hospitals and services is a dollar that taxpayer money is saved and a dollar that the taxpayer doesn't have to pay. Therefore, we are laser focused on growing the productivity economy of the Northern Territory and harnessing the vast potential of our natural resources. In 24-25, taxes and royalties on minerals and gas comprise of approximately 38% of our own source revenue and 11% of the Territory's total revenue. Mining royalties contributed over $200 million to the NT Treasury in 2025-26 financial year. The mining sector forms the greatest sole contributor to the Territory's own source revenue through royalties and associated revenue, and is critical to our economic recovery as that sector grows quickly. We know that gas, Madam Speaker, is important, and we know, Madam Speaker, that people in this chamber have made money out of the gas industry. They have family working there. They have direct people working. They have indirect money. So the mining and the gas industry of the Northern Territory is critical that we expand it, and we do what we can to make sure that we support that industry. So, Madam Speaker, if you're out there listening, what I can say is this government supports the gas industry, we support the mining industry, and we want to work towards making it easier for you to do business, to invest, to bring your workers here in the Northern Territory and spend your money in the Northern Territory. Two of the NT's largest mines are projected to close in the next 5 years, being 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙍𝙍, representing a substantial royalty reduction. It is therefore imperative to our economic future that exploration for minerals and petroleum is expedited, and the new mining projects task force in the final investment decisions ASAP. In this NT budget, the Department of Mining and Energy have received an operating budget for 25-26 of approximately $40 million. Prioritised within this budget is the role of the 𝙍𝙬𝙍𝙍 Project Management Office, charged with the coordination and facilitation of development of activities in the 𝙍𝙬𝙍. Madam Speaker, we support the 𝙍𝙬𝙍, we support the gas, and we need to make sure we get that gas out of the ground and then to market at a competitive price. And we intend to do that to the best of our ability. Unleashing the 𝙍𝙬𝙍 is the most rapid way to guarantee energy security for Territorians and the additional long-term royalty revenue stream for our Treasury. Remember, Madam Speaker, onshore gas comes directly to us, where offshore gas goes into the Commonwealth and then indirectly comes back to us through our Commonwealth funding. This coming month, we should see the resumption of operations at 𝙍𝙀𝙇𝙀𝙍 and the opening of Noble's Knob Mine in Tennant Creek, in the land of opportunity. These and other advanced projects are critical to getting the NT economy back on its feet after years of economic ruin and policy from the Labor government. The agriculture and fishing sector is worth approximately $1.3 billion to the economy and also must be prioritised. This budget includes vital spending in this space with a focus on increased economic growth and viability of existing and emerging primary industries. We will continue to promote and enable economic growth in partnership with industry through research, development and capacity building projects and activities that support new and existing agribusiness. For example, I welcome the recent announcement yesterday by the NT Court of Appeal to uphold the Fortune Agribusiness water licence for Singleton Station. Fortune have been clear, transparent and positive throughout the entire licensing process and subsequent court hearings. This represents the end of almost a decade of work by Fortune, with the Singleton project expected to create over 1,000 jobs and an annual economic contribution of roughly $200 million. Our government is determined to facilitate investment in such projects and ensure that the NT government dollars are spent making our jurisdiction more attractive and more competitive to business. This includes prioritising our research farms to consolidate their projects in line with industry feedback. Under this government, each research farm will develop a detailed business case to better support and assist the industry and the Northern Territory's economy. Budget 25-26 sees a commitment of $1 million over 2 years to implement a comprehensive research program integrated for the integration and management of the mango twig tip dieback. The Northern Territory mango industry, which contributes over $100 million annually to the economy and employs around 2,500 workers across multiple sites, is being threatened by this pest. The Northern Territory is responsible for more than half the nation's mango production, accounting for 52% of Australia's total mango crop in the 24-25 season. This crisis is not just a local concern, but a national one. This commitment to support the Territory economic development underpin market access for agricultural products by providing research, extension and diagnostic function and managing plant, pest and animal diseases.
Please take your seat, Minister. Point of order, member for Casuarina.
Order 43, ma'am. If Minister can have extension of time, please.
Do members grant an extension of time? Aye. Please continue, Minister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, for programs such as the BERT, the trailer that's been made for emergency outbreaks or biosecurity, it's important that we manage that if there's any outbreak in the Northern Territory. We are a remote area and we need to ensure that we're ready for any potential biohazards. Madam Speaker, the 25-26 has also locked in $1 million to protect sustainability of the NT's aquatic resources through continued operations of the Fisheries Compliance Unit. Fishing is a vital part of the NT lifestyle and economy. Commercial recreation combined directly supports over 2,700 jobs and approximately $280 million to the economy each year. And Madam Speaker, let me know because I spend my money on fishing. The Fisheries Compliance Unit conducts on-water patrols and inspections of commercial fishing tour operators and recreational fishers to deter crime and ensure sustainability of our NT's world-class fishing. Since February 24, the Fisheries Compliance Unit has conducted 234 fisheries patrol, of which 40 were conducted jointly with Aboriginal Marine Rangers on country, interacted with over 2,600 individuals engaged in commercial and recreational fishing activities, inspected approximately 1,200 vessels, seized over 250 items and detected 170 offences. The Fisheries Compliance Unit was established by the former government with time-limited funding for just 2 years. What was their plan after the funding ran out? Again, Madam Speaker, this is another example of setting up a program, getting it running and simply not funding it. We know how important our fisheries are and we'll continue to support their ongoing work. As the Minister for Agriculture, Fisheries, Mines and Energy, it is my responsibility not just to manage but develop and grow these sectors for the betterment of all Territorians. And Madam Speaker, I say I'm going to do that to the best of my abilities. I support the agriculture industry, I support fisheries, I support mining, I support energy and I support the gas industry. And I want to make sure that it's well known that they've got my support and I'll do whatever I can to make sure that you develop the Northern Territory, you spend your money here, you're safe here and you invest in the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, I commend the Treasurer on handing down this budget, designed not only to reduce crime but also provides the foundation which our economy can be rebuilt and will be rebuilt. Thank you, Madam Speaker.